Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We got our first full first-round NFL mock draft from Dill. I'm going to absolutely tear it to shreds. Excited to get into it. Again, before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. Draft season is the best season because you can talk about the prospects. People view prospects differently. And the support you guys have shown, whether it's throwing in your comments, whether it's talking about position fits, really does mean a lot to the boys. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Give Dill some heat for his draft selections in the comment section as well. Please, Dill, let's get into it. We got Bryce Young. So the Indianapolis Colts trading up to that number one overall spot with the Chicago Bears. Let's talk about this for a minute in the sense that I think this makes the most sense for both teams. The Colts need a quarterback. They might be the most desperate team in the league to find a quarterback. In the Bears, it makes a total amount of sense for them to trade back to that 4 spot because they're probably guaranteed a Will Anderson or Jalen Carter.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is unless the Bears either love Bryce Young a lot more than almost anyone else, or if they're less sold on Justin Fields than maybe the rest of the country is, who kind of thinks he might be the guy moving forward, they really should trade back because what you're going to end up with is a number one caliber player. Will Anderson, Jalen Carter are two guys who on a given year could be the number one.
They both would have gone number one last year over Trayvon Walker, no doubt in my mind. One thing to note is that, Justin Fields was not selected by Ryan Poles in Chicago. So, Justin Fields might not be the guy in Chicago. And if they get to their quarterback rating and say, hey, Bryce Young is legit, like a franchise quarterback, maybe they just hang in there and sit and select them. That being said, it does make a lot of sense to acquire a lot of draft capital, build around Justin Fields, because quite frankly, that roster around Justin is just horrible on both sides of the football. It would make sense. You saw Justin flash. Let's create a lot of draft capital and start building around Justin Fields because he did flash like that franchise quarterback capability.
That's what I'm thinking. He flashed as a guy who, if you're in a good team, you can win around with him just because of what he can do with his legs. And he's got a good arm. You just, again, you haven't had any help at wideout. You've had very little help up front. Your running game's been mediocre at best. So
the running game's only been good because Justin Fields.
Exactly. So it's like, I think everyone wants to see him with a decent team because he actually was able to move the offense down the field here and there this year with a quite a weak team. So
yeah, and then number 2, CJ Stroud. That's both our quarterbacks. I can't fight you on that. I know the NFL is going to like Will Levis, and we'll talk about him when he comes off the board. But if you're talking about quarterback 2, I think CJ Stroud just declared for the draft here this morning. I think he's kind of locked to go 2. And then the Cardinals are sprinting this card up to get Will Anderson at 3. This makes a lot of sense from he's probably the number 1 player on most of their big boards. They don't necessarily need a quarterback. And you're getting a position of need in a high-impact position in Will Anderson at that pass rusher.
Yeah, and I honestly think just looking at the next 2 picks with the Cardinals and Bears here, I think they're going to go – this is going to be the 2 who get selected. The order, I think, could be debatable. I personally think Jalen Carter is much closer than it seems like a lot of people think in terms of a draft prospect to Will Anderson, but – yeah, I wouldn't fight it. I wouldn't fight either way.
That's kind of where I stand on it. I lean Will Anderson as if you told me, okay, build your defense. I'd probably take Will Anderson over Jalen Carter, but both are phenomenal picks. And the Chicago Bears, if we're talking just top 5 picks, they won the draft so far. They trade down to 4, acquire a lot of draft capital because there's going to be a bidding war for that number 1 overall spot. And they get a guy that probably last year is the number 1 player off the board. Complete win.
Yeah, no, 100%. They got to trade back.
That's where I'm leaning to. Number 5, Myles Murphy. This makes a lot of sense to me. He's my number 2 edge guy off the board after Will Anderson. He is as steady as they come. I think he can get better at that pass rush. I think he left a little to be desired on that 30-year film. That being said, he's a hammer against the run. He has a lot of really good traits. Talk about a guy who is 275 pounds. Can beat a tackle right through their chest, can beat a tackle with the speed. His get off is phenomenal for a 275-pound dude. This makes a lot of sense for the Seahawks. Pete Carroll wants to address that position, and you get a guy with such a high his floor is so high.
in this, to me, I think you could go corner, but given that they've got a pick later in the first round, I think you're a little deeper
Yes.
with corners.
Yes.
To me, Myles Murphy is the second best edge rusher, and I don't think it's particularly close for the next guy. I think corner, you're pretty stacked. Like you got 4 or 5 guys who I think all could make a run at being the number one corner. So
And
I think
we'll talk about corner in a couple spots. I think the Lions at 6 are also a team that needs a cornerback. But it doesn't really make sense to take a corner that early because like you said, there will probably be 6 cornerbacks in my top 32, 5 of which will probably be my top 20 on my big board. This cornerback class is loaded. Even in the day 2, when you're talking about guys like Emmanuel Forbes, like this cornerback class is really strong and really deep. You can get a good cornerback later on in the draft. The edge position, I think, takes a serious drop off after Myles Murphy and maybe even Tyree Wilson.
yeah, that's my thinking. I think you could very easily see the Seahawks going corner here, but I just feel like they can wait at this point.
Yep, with you. Okay. Bryan Bresee going to the Lions. This makes a lot of sense, and he's kind of a polarizing prospect for a lot of people because you haven't seen him healthy since his true freshman year. Last year he tears his ACL. This year he's like kidney disease. Obviously, his younger sister passes away from cancer. Has had a rocky collegiate career the last 2 years.
And not even the fault of his own, though. That's my thing. He's just had an unfortunate series of events with health and all that. But when he's at his top, he is
dominant.
He could be as good as Jalen Carter. Like when you see Bryan Bresee really rolling, that big to be that big and athletic. He's got like some JJ Watt kind of style to him, I feel like. And to me, you look at some of the games toward the later part, I thought UNC, Tennessee looked, he's kind of getting back to form, I thought. And when he's as dominant as they come. And when you're sitting there as the Lions, you get to play a little better defense, obviously. I think you can get best available here and get really good.
And he's a guy that the ceiling, I think he could be just as good of a pro as Jalen Carter. I think Jalen Carter put the dominance on the field a little bit more consistently than Bryan Bresee, but this was a guy that this summer we were talking about, is it such a lock that Jalen Carter is the best interior defensive lineman in the class? And I was probably wrong about that. I think Jalen Carter is certainly the lock to be like that number one interior defensive lineman, but Bryan Bresee is right on his heels. Will Levis going to the Raiders, another quarterback needy team. You guys know how we feel about Will Levis, but it's also easy to see why the NFL likes this dude. My big thing about Will Levis, and I've said it on a few other mock draft videos, is if you put Will Levis on Tennessee, you put him on Ohio State, I think he looks a lot better. He was throwing behind an offensive line that stunk. He was throwing the 2 true freshmen in the transfer as his 3 main targets. He has every single physical attribute you want in a franchise quarterback. It just hasn't quite come together. So we all have to be prepared for a team in the top 10 and maybe even top 5 taking Will Levis just based on the trades.
This is a tough, like if I'm the Raiders GM, I'm not really thinking Will Levis here. I think there's more they can do. But this feels like a Raiders pick. The Raiders, they draft guys high. They've been like the worst drafting team you've probably ever seen in the history of football for the last few years. And I feel like they're going to want to make a move. They obviously kind of got rid of Carr. Pretty much. Obviously, he said he was getting traded, and that's done. So they got to usher the new era in, and I just don't feel like Mark Davis is one to wait. I feel like he's just going to do it, and whether Will Levis is worth the top 10 pick, I personally don't think, but this is where I think Mark Davis is going.
Okay, number 8, the Falcons go Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I know that's like one of your personal favorites in the class. I'm still going Tyree Wilson here. I think you're kind of like Felix Anudike-Uzomah is a very solid dude that I think goes late day 1. I'm not taking him in the top 10. This seems like you're just kind of forcing a position of need here. That they do need a pass rusher who's good against the run, but he's not a top 10 dude. And if I'm taking somebody at number 8 overall, I want significant upside, and that would be Tyree Wilson.
He is definitely the third, in my opinion, the third best edge rusher. I think what he showed in terms of consistency, the play was certainly, I thought, better when Tyree Wilson, probably in terms of consistency and being pretty dominant throughout. And I'm not sure he's like as unathletic, or it seems like lacking the athletic upside that people think. I mean,
no, it's just Tyree Wilson's special. Like I can see defensive coordinators, defensive line coaches looking at that Texas Tech film and the flashes you see and how disruptive he can be and say, let me get my hands on him.
That gets like into the Aiden Hutchinson, Trayvon Walker argument because like, okay, everyone's like, oh, Aiden Hutchinson had unbelievable tape. That was certainly probably better than Trayvon Walker. And then, well, he's got more upside, which is probably true. I mean, you look at how Trayvon tested and just look at the traits, he probably did. But, I mean, we look at who was more disruptive and dominant in their first year. It was obviously Hutchinson. He had better numbers. Like the play I thought was better. Just because you're a good athlete doesn't mean you're going to be as good of a like football player. I feel like there's correlation, but I feel like now people are reaching into I'm just going to draft the guy because his combine or because I saw a play where he looked really good. I mean, Uzomah was consistently incredible. That's what I thought. Like he was just really good.
I see it.
And he's I think he's a good big athletic guy he has kind of it all.
My one argument would be, okay, who's going to be the better pro between Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker in 3 years? Like Hutchinson was the better rookie, I'll give you that. Trayvon Walker is trending up, and he's trending up quickly.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll see, but we get into these. There's been plenty of guys who
I don't know. Felix. You're telling me you watched Felix Anudike-Uzomah and say he's a top 10 guy?
Yeah. No. Dude, I think he was really good. And he was in a system that didn't favor
his
skill set because
that's true.
They were doing the 3-man.
Yeah. Rush 3 drop 8 was not his bag. He was rushing from inside a tackle.
You got to see him really rip it up. He could win on the inside. He could win outside. He was a force.
Yeah, no, I see it. Now, this pick I seriously have some issues with. Jordan Addison at 9. I like Jordan Addison. I just don't see how if you're taking a wide receiver, I don't see how you're not taking Quentin Johnston.
What are you going to pair him up with Terrace Marshall?
Terrace Marshall is not stopping me from taking Quentin Johnston. He's Marshall
head on that team probably. Well, not behind Derek Moore, but
DJ. No. Marshall's not stopping me from taking Quentin Johnston. I will simply not allow that. You're gonna sit here and say, "Oh, I'm not taking the best wide receiver in the class because his attributes are too similar to Quentin Johnston, who I legitimately think could be an absolute freak in the NFL."
He could be, but Jordan Addison, I mean, lest we forget what he looked like at Pitt when he was the man. It was
good. He's good.
He was dominant. And the more I've watched him, the more I think he's faster than I was giving him credit for. I think
smoother.
I think he's constantly open. Those things all matter. I think Jordan Addison's really good. I think he fits what Carolina needs probably a little more, and I don't think the gap is that astronomical between the two.
Okay, so I disagree with the pick. I'm simply not backing it up. But one thing I would say is Jordan Addison did it in 2 different offenses, which I think helps. If he just did it at USC, that USC offense was really conducive to big time wide receiver numbers. He did it at Pitt with Pat Narduzzi. That he was that good on the Pitt Panthers, which I think it really kind of verifies how good of a wide receiver Jordan Addison is. Number 10, the Eagles, they could go a lot of different places. I think Tyree Wilson would be a good fit here, but Christian Gonzalez, I know he's your cornerback 1. He's going to be my cornerback 3, maybe 4, but I do this is where you start taking the cornerbacks, and this is where you might start seeing a serious run on these cornerbacks who are the top 20 guys we're talking about. 6'2", 205, great movement skills. This pick makes a lot of sense. We simply won't fight it. Number 11, Peter Skoronski, first offensive lineman off the board. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the offensive line class in general.
No, this one's a tough one because I think him and Paris Johnson are really tight for this pick. I don't think either of them are top 10 players. You just with Paris Johnson, the pass protection, there were just some holes that it felt like, and times he was losing reps where he shouldn't. Granted, he's got the upside to be extremely good, and the game's already there. But
that's what doesn't make more sense for Tennessee. Wouldn't if you're gonna run the ball behind Derrick Henry, I want a tackle that's gonna move bodies. And
the thing is, right now, I think they need a left tackle, and I don't think they're that far away from winning and being really competitive. If they can figure out the quarterback spot, whether that's Ryan Tannehill or however else they might do it.
Yeah.
They're pretty loaded everywhere else, and I don't know that Petit Frere and Paris Johnson, either way you have two, like a left tackle from that group who's really good. I think as much as Peter Skronsky might not have the ceiling of Paris Johnson, I think he'll be
damn good.
Very ready in the first 3 years, and he'll be able to play at a high level for left tackle. So that's probably my lean, just because I think they're more win now than this pick is, than their place in this draft.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, pick 12, Quentin Johnson, finally off the board. I'm convinced that you might have just put Quentin Johnson at 12 just so we can pair him up with C.J. Stroud, which I don't hate. I don't hate that at all. Number 13, Paris Johnson Jr. Love it. My offensive tackle 1. Upside is just stupid good with Paris Johnson. I think he's the most explosive tackle in the class, and when it turns like running the football.
And these are where these tackles kind of belong in my mind.
Agreed.
In the 10 to 20 range.
When you're evaluating this tackle class, there's not a single tackle that would go over those 3 tackles that we talked about last year with Ickey, Evan Neal, and Charles Cross.
Yeah, exactly. That's my thinking on it. And
now teams might go get a tackle early because if you want a left tackle and you really fall in love with one of them, but I kind of agree with the placement of tackles. 14, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'd like to talk about him a little bit. So wide receiver 3 off the board, that's where he'll be for me as well. And he goes to a perfect fit. I think you're looking for Jackson Smith-Njigba. I get it. And Dill, I know you don't quite agree with I don't think he's that fast. I don't think he's going to test that fast. That being said, I don't think it matters. Like, you go and watch him in 2021. He's quarterback's best friend. He knows he's the smartest wide receiver in this class. He just understands the position, which when you're looking at what's succeeding at the NFL right now, it's not just raw talent. It's not just like the Julio Jones, who I'm bigger, faster, stronger than everyone else. It's the wide receivers who get the position, who know how to create separation. And Jackson Smith-Njigba is that dude. Man coverage, he's going to win. In zone coverage, he's going to sit it down and make easy passing lanes for quarterbacks. He just gets the position. He's going to be a good addition for anybody who takes him. He's just not as flashy as a guy like Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, and that's my granted. I do think he's got a little more big play potential, but I think it's hard to argue that the top 3 is Addison, Quentin Johnson, and Njigba. And I think they're all not that far apart. I think Jackson Smith's probably a little further behind the 2, but I don't think I wouldn't personally be like totally offended or anything if teams reached up and got Njigba early, because I think he's really good. I just think people forget about him because
I agree. I think there is an element of that. Brian Branch going 15. I really do like Brian Branch. He just can do anything you really want. I like him best as kind of like a box safety-ish, but he can play nickel. I think he's good enough to play nickel. I don't know if that's where I'd put him. He can do anything. I think if you're a team that's taking Brian Branch, they just want to know what you're going to do with him. But, man, he is impactful when he's around the line of scrimmage. He can play like that deep center field. I think he's going to test fine in terms of range. This is a really solid pick. I think Brian Branch is a really good one of the better, just like pure football players in the class. Washington Commanders, go get Joey Porter Jr. He is my cornerback too. Oh, just under Devin Witherspoon, and that's subject to change. You're getting a guy with extreme length. He can play man coverage. I really like that pick. And then Broderick Jones to the Steelers. That also is a pick that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, in this, to me, I think him and Anton Harrison are pretty close. You probably fall in love with either of them. I think Anton Harrison, not quite the athlete that Broderick Jones is, but probably played a little better college football and probably a bigger, stronger. To me, he looks like he probably has some more potential to be a really dominant run blocker. But Broderick Jones, again, if he kind of melds into what I think people think he can be like all pro good. So I think that in the Steelers, they just desperately need tackles.
So pick 18, you get Jalen Jones from A&M. I know a lot of people who are very high on Jalen Jones. I'm not quite as high. I probably am going Keely Ringo here. They both have very similar skill sets. It's a team that needs a cornerback spot. If you're the Lions, you're going to have a wealth of picks. I'm going Devin Witherspoon here. He's my cornerback 1. If you want a guy, I'm taking a cornerback in the top 20. I want them to be nails in man coverage, and that was Devin Witherspoon. But these cornerbacks are so good, in my opinion, that I wouldn't fight you on this. And then gotta talk about Tyree Wilson falling all the way to 19. They'll rip him apart, I guess.
nothing to rip apart. You're not like anti Tyree Wilson. I think
Well,
in this like little window, I don't think he was the fit that maybe you're looking for. Like I think he's probably on the plus side of 15, if you will. So he's a top 15 player for me. But like looking at how this draft shook out, I think he didn't. There were teams that he wasn't filling the needs exactly for these other teams in that range. So that's where I have him here. I think he actually fits well with like what the Bucks do. They usually have bigger defensive linemen, and that's certainly what Tyree Wilson is. And my problem is though, he just wasn't steadily dominant. Like again, like what I look at these other top guys, and I don't know that the pass rushing skill is there. He did win on some power and some explosiveness. Like those athletic traits obviously shine through. But I don't think he was consistent enough using his hands well in the run game and doing some of those like more not like what you need to do, I feel like, to win in the NFL when everyone's a good athlete.
So here's my take on you clearly, if you guys have been listening to us and you listened to us last year, Dale, you're much more of like, what have you done for me on the football field as opposed to like, how good can you be with the physical attributes? That's kind of where I lean to. I'd be very surprised if you see Tyree Wilson fall to 19 because when you're a GM and you're a defensive line coach or a defensive coordinator, you have confidence in your ability to coach guys up. And you see Tyree Wilson in the flashes he showed. He's a wrecking ball sometimes. And you're like, give me him. Give me him all day. Let me get him as a professional. He doesn't have any classes to take care of. He's a professional pass rusher now. Let me coach him up. That's what I think why you see guys like Tyree Wilson or Trayvon Walker go so high, because these defensive coaches are saying they're salivating over like the physical attributes that these kind of guys have. I'm with you though. And Tyree Wilson is not like a third-year guy like Trayvon Walker was. So it's like, if you haven't put it together yet, like, are you ever going to put it together and take those physical attributes and put them on the field? We'll see. He's the one I'm most excited to watch as he progresses in his NFL career. Pick 20, Keely Ringo. Woolen, Ringo on the outsides would just be a brilliant.
Pick City. Like, they're just going to get a zillion million picks.
And Woolen, we loved him last year. Talk about a guy that has all the skill sets in the world, the physical attributes in the world, and he's put it together as a rookie. You have Kobe Bryant, who can kind of play on the inside too. This would be a really good secondary, and this is a Seattle team that needs help on the defense side of the ball, and they get it. The Chargers. This is about as high as I've seen Christopher Smith going. I'm a Christopher Smith guy. Christopher Smith, in my mind, he's not going to test like a freak. He's not going to test like maybe Antonio Johnson will test or Brian Branch will test. When you watch him play, this dude's a genius. Like, he just gets the sport. In terms of run support, he's there. He's filling the hole he needs. He's making tackles. And in terms of coverage, he's just all over the place. He just gets the sport. And at that safety spot, it's all about instincts. And Christopher Smith has those. And I think it's a little high for him, but I'm not going to fight the pick.
I mean, my thing is I think he pairs exceptionally well with Derwin. Because, like,
yes, agreed.
You want Derwin to have more of the freedom to be inside the box and making plays all over the field, whereas you want – I mean, Christopher Smith is, I think, personally the best free safety in the class. I don't think anyone can do what he can do or has the instincts that he has, and that's why I just feel like he pairs better than like how I guess currently they have Alohi Gilman, but I think Christopher Smith has potential to, I mean, just cut down the big plays they were giving up and some of the issues that team had us. I mean, you saw him reared their head in that playoff game. Like, you gotta be able to take the football away once in a while, and I think they
took the football away 5 times.
Well, yeah, but like I mean, in their regular season, like you look at what their safeties are doing, not getting a ton of turnovers, and
yeah,
I mean, Trevor Lawrence was giving them some, but I think you want a guy who can play more of a ball hawk role, because that's not what Derwin James does. He's more of a box. He covers. You want him kind of around the ball, because that's where he shines.
He balances out Derwin well. I think Michael Mayer would be a nice pick here. Like, give Justin Herbert like that big, because especially Mike Williams can't really stay healthy. Keenan Allen getting old. Like, I wouldn't mind a guy that can be Justin Herbert's security blanket, because he was kind of just, a lot of those guys were in and out of the lineup. And Michael Mayer is going to be a guy that's going to come in. And again, that's high. Like, I'm not a huge Michael Mayer fan, but I think he'd be a good fit in Los Angeles. Dolphins forfeited the pick. The Ravens go get Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt's just going to run out. Like, I don't
No,
know.
I've been watching Jalen Hyatt back. He is really good. I
He's
mean,
really fast. He's not good.
he's a guy who's gonna. The Ravens need someone who can stretch the field. I feel like they're constantly playing in like a 12-man or an 11-man box because
Yes.
they don't have wideouts to strike fear in your heart at all. And I mean, Jalen Hyatt, he's the best deep ball guy probably in this class. But also, like, you just look. I get it. People like want to say, "Oh, it's Tennessee's offense," yada yada. Like, I mean, he was open constantly. He catches the ball. He runs well with it. I think he's just a really good wideout.
You actually kind of sold me on the you want to have someone who maybe strikes a little fear into the safeties. And like you can't just creep up safeties and play those like 8-man boxes because you have Jalen Hyatt who I'll give you this. Jalen Hyatt is a deep ball specialist. And you have someone like Rashad Bateman who I know has struggled with injuries, but he's more of the possession guy who can work the middle of the field. You have a guy like Jalen Hyatt who like these safeties are going to have to respect. Not only is he fast, but he's elite at tracking those deep balls, which I think is a skill that not enough people like look at. So, like, oh, you want someone who can stretch the field? He's just fast. Like that doesn't really do it. You want a guy who has speed, but also can track the ball and make those plays. And Jalen Hyatt is a guy that can do it. I'll never admit it, but you sold me a little bit on Jalen Hyatt there, especially with the fit to Baltimore. Devin Witherspoon going to Minnesota, my cornerback one. This would be a steal. And this is where I think you'll see, and you have in your mock here, like the run on cornerbacks. Like there are a bunch of there might be 6 cornerbacks that earn first round grades for me. And this is where you see that run happening. Devin Witherspoon going to Minnesota, Cam Smith going to Jacksonville. I think both those picks make a lot of sense, and you're getting a guy that's probably a top 20 dude talent-wise later in this first round.
Yeah, and that's kind of. I mean, the Jags need secondary help so bad. I think Cam Smith's the guy who, I guess maybe the steadiness, like how sticky he is. I don't know that he is like what the top dogs are in this draft. Maybe like a Joey Porter and a Christian Gonzalez, but he's a guy who will take the ball away. That's for sure. And
Playmaker.
big tackles around the box. He has the versatility to play in the slot too. So I think for Jaguars, where they have some young corners, they just
Tyson Campbell's been awesome.
Who can be the guy? And Tyson Campbell on the edge has obviously started to emerge. But I think with Cam Smith, you have some versatility to kick him into the nickel, and that's where he kind of makes sense for me versus like some of the other guys who are more pure edge guys. So there's a little of my thinking.
Yeah, I could get with it. Michael Mayer going to the Giants. I like it. I mean,
they use Bellinger so much. I feel like you could basically just get a Bellinger-like player, but just as good of a Bellinger-like player. You
and Michael Mayer can block a lot better.
That's how it's because again, he's not like that top end, maybe tight end like a Travis Kelce. I don't think he's got that pass catching skill. But I mean, the Giants, I think they rely on using tight ends a fair amount, and why not just get the best one? And you're not going to be picking super high. It doesn't look like. So I think that's where they go.
I love Brian Dabble. The Giants are. I go Bills, and then I think I go Lions, and I think the Giants are right there because Brian Dabble is just the absolute man. Emmanuel Forbes, get him in there. This is another one of those like there's so Devin Witherspoon, Joey Porter Jr., Emmanuel Forbes, Christian Gonzalez, like these long, rangy cornerbacks that have long arms. You talk about a guy that's going to force turnovers. Emmanuel Forbes, I believe, in his 3 seasons at Mississippi State, had 9 interceptions. Like this dude just forces turnovers like it's his job. And he's brought like 3 of them back for pick sixes. I'm Emmanuel Forbes. I think we're going to be talking about a first round pick soon.
I think he's really good. I feel like
rangy.
Yeah, and you're just again another guy you kind of forget about. I feel like in this class, but he's played really good for 2 straight years now. So.
And I feel bad for a guy like Clark Phillips, who's probably just going to fall because he's a damn good cornerback. But there's so many cornerbacks who are like give you that like cornerback one boundary dude that is so rare to find. That Clark Phillips, who's going to be more of a nickel guy, probably falls, even though he's a very, very good cornerback. Antonio Johnson to the Cowboys, I would like this pick a lot. Antonio Johnson, similar to Brian Branch, is just really, really good at football. And he has all the physical attributes to be a nickel corner, to be a box safety. If there is a Derwin James in the class, I think it would be Antonio Johnson. Now, from what I saw in 2022, it was a little disappointing, and I think that's why you're talking about him more towards the end of the first round as opposed to in that top 15, which I had him in coming into the year. Him and Brian Branch, there's just like endless possibilities. And if Dan Quinn is still in Dallas, which we'll see if he is or not, Dan Quinn's going to have a field day using this cat.
And I feel like when you watched Texas A&M, you saw how impactful those safeties were. I mean, when they weren't playing well, like that team was really weak, and they were just, but both of them were frankly playmakers. And Antonio Johnson, I think, just be a guy who's make a lot of plays in the league. And the Cowboys, again, another team that just probably needs help there.
Yeah, Isaiah McGuire to the Broncos. I've seen you talk about Isaiah McGuire because you like him a lot more than me.
Isaiah McGuire is another guy who I feel like people like, again, and it goes back to it. That's my constant thing is people discount guys who don't make wildly flashy plays and don't have the freak athleticism. But I similar to Felix, a guy who, I mean, he can win in multiple ways. He can win on the inside. He can win with speed. He plays really solid against the run. Really productive is probably the big thing. Again, like you look at these guys who get a lot of sacks in college, that certainly matters a lot to me at least. And I mean, that was him. I just feel like an ultra refined pass rusher who's, I mean, he's got the traits essentially to be good. Maybe like, does he have the traits of a Will Anderson? No, but he's not a bad athlete by any stretch of the imagination. And he was ultra productive in the SEC.
I'm interested to see where this edge class looks like after, like with Jared Verse opting to go back to Florida State, after Tyree Wilson, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, I think there's a drop off like Will Anderson gap, Myles Murphy gap, and then I have Tyree Wilson based on the traits, but Felix Anudike and Tyree Wilson kind of 3-4 similar, and then I think there's like another drop off, and I'm interested to see what edge defenders kind of come up, what pass rushers kind of rise to that top. And Isaiah McGuire, I've only gotten like one game in on him. I've been impressed, but I need to get back into him a little bit more. I don't hate the pick. The Bills, Jack Campbell, watched him the other night. He is like phenomenal. Like in terms of Trenton Simpson has all the traits to be linebacker one. He was not good in 2022. And we'll talk about this when we get to our linebacker position rankings. Like, I think he's going to go in the first round just because, again, it's going to be these defense coordinators saying, like, look at this kid. Give me him all day. But in terms of, like, best linebacker play on the film, like Jack Campbell, pretty damn good.
I mean, to me, the Bills need to stop the run. I feel like when they start giving up a lot of yards, it's typically when the teams can pound on him a little bit. And he's, in my opinion, pretty far ahead of everyone else in terms of pure in-box run-stopping linebackers, in terms of his ability to take on blocks and shut them and fill holes.
He's an animal taking on blocks.
That's his game. So it's like, that's what I personally think the Bills need. And, I mean...
So Tremaine Edmonds is going away.
That feels like inevitable because they're paying Milano a fair amount now. And I think they're going to need a guy here, so...
Jack Campbell's a guy that's going to fall because I don't think he'll run the fastest 40, and then you're going to have people like, oh, I don't know if he can go sideline to sideline. The thing with Jack Campbell is he gets that sport. Like everything just seems so slow to him. He sees everything so slowly, and the game is just really easy for him to read. And when I say slowly, like he just knows what he's doing on the football field. Kind of like what we thought Nakobe Dean did last year. Like he just gets it. Trenton Simpson, the game just sped up for him, and he was like kind of like didn't really know what he was doing. At that linebacker position, those instincts,
Campbell makes so many tackles, so it's like
he works through traffic, and I also don't think he'll be as bad in coverage as people think because he's long, like 6'5", long arms. Like I have questions about him, like man coverage on a tight end or carrying a tight end. I think he can do it athletically, like carry a tight end up the seam. But I think even more importantly, like he was really good dropping back in zone coverage and getting his hands on footballs. He had 2 picks. He has some ball skills. He's a guy that you might not think's the best athlete, but I think he's a damn good football player with athleticism. I don't know if I take him this high, but I think he's a very good football player. Kansas City Chiefs, Josh Downs. He's my next wide receiver off the board. Him and Zay Flowers are awfully close. Josh Downs, talk about QB-friendly dudes. He was that UNC offense. Like him and Drake May were electric together. He's been that UNC offense for the last 2 years. He just gets open. He never drops balls. And he makes moves after the catch.
Yeah, and the Chiefs need a playmaker again on the edge. So like I like what Juju does, and he's a good possession receiver, but they need someone who can kind of open the field up a little bit, and how they were when Tyreek Hill was playing really well, they just looked unguardable. Like, I think they could use a player. Not saying he is Tyreek Hill, because if he was, he'd be going top 5. But like, they need a player with that similar skill set who can open the field up. And I personally think he's going to run faster than Zay Flowers. I think in terms of deep and long speed, I think he's pretty
both
close.
Josh Downs and Zay Flowers, you look at their body type and you're like, more of like a slot guy. Both of them track and make plays vertically down the field extremely well. Now,
it's like the Chiefs don't play they don't play X, like their wideouts don't play the traditional like on the they play in the slot. They play jumboed.
I think this would be a good fit, and as a Bills fan, I'm not a fan of it. Now, this makes the most, like, if this happens, I don't think so, because I think Bijan is good enough to go higher than this, but this would make a heck of a lot of sense. You want to run the football behind a really good offensive line with Jalen Hurts. Bijan Robinson is the best running back we've evaluated in the NFL draft since Saquon Barkley. And you're getting him at the end of the first round. And I'm not a big draft running backs high. This is perfect.
Yeah, no, I honestly would be really surprised if he makes it this far. I'd be but I mean, if he is, they got to take him here.
Yeah, he is, and he can do so much, like in terms of catching the ball as well. The Bijan Robinson, he's not a running back; he's an offensive weapon, and that's what I'll call him. And I'll be able to justify myself putting him in the top 15. That'll do it for the first round of Dill's first NFL mock draft 1.0. We appreciate you guys checking us out. Honestly, not as stupid as I thought. I thought I'd be banging my head against the wall. Dill, you did a pretty good job.
Like, we'll see. I mean, I'll come out on top when we check this back next year.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, save it for the archives. We appreciate you guys checking us out. Mine will be out on Tuesday. That's when we're going to record it. So stay tuned for that one. Again, let us know in the comment section what you guys think of the draft. We appreciate you guys checking us out. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.